So as of a couple days ago, or a few depending on when I release this, as I'm sure literally everyone and their grandma knows, the Bluey episode The Sign has premiered, and it's arguably the most hyped up story in the show's entire history. I mean, to say that this episode was advertised and promoted would be a huge understatement. Like, they were constantly releasing stuff about it, having people involved talk about how good it was, and where I live, they even had actual billboards just to advertise this one special. And with all of that in mind, and the extremely high excitement of all my friends, there was a lot riding on it. And personally, leading up to the episode's release, I felt that there was simply no way it could ever live up to the hype. Like, of course, it's about the wedding of Rad and Frisky, that's a huge milestone and all, and of course it was gonna have some emotion and craziness, because it's a big event, but would it really be that good? Well, yes! Absolutely! Because to say that this special episode was an absolute gem would be a huge understatement, and in my opinion, arguably serves as not only an amazing Bluey special, but also a perfect finale for not only season 3, but also the entire show. Now of course, despite all those crazy rumors a while back, I don't think the show is actually ending, and it definitely seems like there will be more Bluey content in the future. I mean, articles have recently come out saying that the Bluey franchise is literally worth billions now, and if I'm remembering correctly, I think Joe Brum also said that this special's longer length was kinda meant to test the idea of a longer Bluey production, which while not officially announced, could lead to even longer projects such as a potential movie. So to say the least, Bluey itself is far from over. Plus, we're even getting another episode after this one to officially conclude season 3, so there you go. But even with that in mind, in regards to what we've already seen happen throughout the entire show's run so far, I still think it serves as both a perfect tribute to everything that has happened in the last 3 seasons, as well as all of the show's elements that fans have come to enjoy, whether it be all the appearances and cameos alike, each character having their moment to shine, callbacks to earlier episodes, the powerful raw emotion and storytelling the show has become renowned for, and even potentially setting up many things for the future, all wrapped up in a beautiful message that not only has a positive moral, but leaves you, not gonna lie, possibly feeling different about life itself, but we'll get further into that later. And honestly, I had such a hard time making this review because there's just so much I have to say, as it's great on just so many levels. But I will try my best to give a rundown and explain why this episode is so beautifully well done. And of course, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, major spoilers ahead, and as much as I want you to watch this, I highly recommend watching the special first, as it's truly an experience for the first time. It's currently available on most platforms from what I know, as it released almost everywhere around the same time I think. But with all that said, I have a lot to say about this episode, so without further ado, let's begin. Now, going off the very start, we have the standard Bluey intro and see the family just playing and having a good time. A simple start to what is arguably a crazy story, but personally I kinda like it. To me, it's kind of a callback to how the show was just originally about a family having simple fun, which the show is arguably still about today, but of course, with its longer runtime, the show isn't just going to make some standard Bluey episode that lasts an extra long amount of time, but rather, a much larger scale story to boot, with the stakes being a lot higher than usual, as big changes are on the horizon, with their iconic house put up for sale. And as you can imagine, Bluey is pretty worried about it. I mean, for anyone who's moved houses before like I have, it's perfectly understandable. This was essentially the place where she played, ate, and slept almost every day of her life. And for it all to potentially get flipped upside down, along with possibly being disconnected with everyone she knows, naturally brings a lot of concerns. And to an extent, it also kinda reflects what the audience might be thinking, as we've also watched all these stories and memories take place here over the years, making Bluey's worries even more relatable. But with the house already listed, and Bandit basically finding a new job of sorts, it seems as if things are already locked in, whether Bluey or even her entire family regret the change or not, so they have to find a way to just roll with it. And one thing I found interesting was that they didn't just go the route of making the kids all sad about it and have the parents all happy, trying to convince them that change is always good. Because while they do try to make Bluey feel better, you can tell that they're also conflicted about it, as it's a big change for everyone, regardless of age. And speaking of change, I really enjoyed how this episode handled the topic overall, because they represent how change can be good, such as in the case of Bandit getting a higher paying job, or even Rad getting a new job to stay with Frisky closer to home, but also that changes often come with sacrifices, such as the family basically having to adapt to a completely new life, one of which they might not even enjoy, and makes them or the audience wonder if the gains are actually worth it, and that while money might get them a better house and things, it can't buy stuff like the genuine friends they've grown to love for so long. And on top of that, not only does the episode reflect on both sides of change, but also adds an additional message to it, because upon hearing of Bluey's announcement, Calypso decided to tell her class a story about change, featuring a tale of a farmer who initially goes through bad changes and events, but with said changes leading to consequences that ultimately put him in a better place by the end. A story that will set the theme for the episode, and is actually based on an old Chinese fable, making it a cool literary reference as well, something the show occasionally does. And this idea of seemingly bad changes or events leading to better ones puts Bluey in a better mood. But of course, with her solely being focused on just staying at the house, misinterprets it and assumes that every event will lead to them not moving, rather than the idea of them moving leading to something better. So from this point, you're just kind of waiting for her to realize the unfortunate truth. And when she does realize, she basically just loses the short amount of happiness she had. And Bandit, not entirely sure of what to do, tries to get help from Chili, who promptly leaves. And I found this scene so shocking when I first saw it, because from watching the entire show, Chili is almost always the one who helps in emotional situations, and is always there to comfort her kids when they're down. So to see her leave, briefly wanting to say something but instead walking away sadly, just shows how serious the situation is. And in general, this episode actually has a surprising amount of both subtle, but also raw emotional moments, from not only the kids, but also the adults. Upon Uncle Stripe letting it slip that Rad is planning to move Frisky out of town, she gets genuinely upset, and not just taken aback or annoyed like in most episodes or stories that would involve something like this, but actually pretty angry, with her being so upset that she is set on canceling the wedding altogether, believing it was all a mistake, causing her to storm off whilst Chili and the kids decide to try and chase her.
What about the sign?
Leave it in, Bluey. The wedding's off.
What? But we're flower girls.
Which at this point, could have easily just been a good excuse to have a bunch of action and chaos to make it funny, and at first that's kinda what it seems like. Chili gets pulled over by the police, Muffin spills her drink all over the car, causing Chili to pull over again and have to clean it up and... Okay, I'm sorry, but I know this is supposed to be a more serious, emotional video and all, but there's no way at least one storyboarder or animator wasn't laughing when they created this shot. Like, what is this view? I'm so sorry. And on top of that, Socks ends up having to go potty right as the group almost reaches Frisky. And from there, you would assume that they would just give up because Frisky is long gone and they have no idea where she is. But of course, with all of their mistakes and mishaps, it actually helps them out. The police stop helps them get info about Frisky's whereabouts from the officer. Muffin's spilled drink actually gives them a chance to spot her. And Socks using the potty causes a butterfly, which in itself looks like the one from Water Slide, to get into the car at the park, which in turn leads them to a literal sign indicating where Frisky went, and then they finally find her.
What are you doing here?
I want to be a flower girl!
And with some emotional moments and discussion, including a surprise from Uncle Rad after he hears about her leaving, everyone gets back together, and the wedding is saved. Yippee! And not only does it wrap up the conflict about the wedding, but it's also nice because it serves as a conclusion to the smaller, more humorous example of the episode's theme, with all of these seemingly bad mistakes and misfortunes actually helping everyone to get back together, something that will be very important to remember later on. But for now, with the whole family back, the celebration begins, and it's a great scene. Because when I say the whole family is there, the whole family is there. Even including Grandpa, oh my goodness he's not actually dead Bob, who immediately gets roasted by Muffin and Bingo.
That's silly. Why do you need to find yourself? Yeah, you're right here.
And not only do we see old characters, but new ones too. Whether it be Brandy, who is now confirmed to be pregnant, ending her years-long struggles with not having a child of her own, or even brand new, never-before-seen characters, who could all potentially play a role in future stories, and all of whom are just having the time of their life, with of course Busker as the DJ, having the ultimate dance mode session. And not only is the scene lots of fun, with everyone we've grown to love over so many episodes having a great time together, with Uncle Stripe perhaps having a bit too much of a good time as usual, but it also serves as a fun break from the more heavy and emotional story, which, considering what happens after this, I think was definitely a good addition, because even though the wedding is over, so is the healer's time at their house, as the day to move out has finally arrived. And as cliche and predictable as it sounds, yeah, it's a pretty emotional ending. As the final stuff moves out, the whole family is sad, even including Bingo, who throughout the entire episode so far had either been unaffected or happy about it. But of course, this is only because she doesn't fully understand what's happening, to an even farther extent than Bluey. So when she learns the actual truth that everything in her life is probably going to change, and she won't have her best friends, she is devastated, being upset and trying to use everything she has to tear out the sign, the thing that to her has caused all of this trouble, but to no success. Despite her best efforts, it's all out of her control, and you can really feel for how powerless she not only is, but also the entire family, as even Bandit, the guy who most likely orchestrated the house move along with Chili, is appearing to have regrets. But with them being a whole family regardless, they eventually find ways to make things better. Chili reassures Bandit that they would at least be together still, and Bluey tells Bingo the story she learned from Calypso, showing her that the move could lead to much better things. And with that, if the episode just ended right here, I would honestly not be mad at all. The family is sad to see everything change, but hopeful for the possibilities, and can look forward to having a better life, where many new adventures await. And yeah, this in itself would be a nice ending, but here's the thing. It's not the end! Because as it turned out, the story has one last trick up its sleeve, with the couple interested in buying the place, going to the lookout from before and finding Bluey's jammed coin, the one that she found at the juice shop, the place where they went after getting help from the officer that pulled them over, and the one Muffin accidentally jammed in. And with this, they actually find a house they want more. A place, I should note, is being sold by Winton's dad, a character who's been divorced and struggled to find a partner since season 2. Now seen with a partner he met at a shop earlier in season 3, and ready to move on to a new place and life himself. Alright, so apologies for barging in with a worse microphone, but I was just editing this clip you see right here, and I just remembered that in the season 2 episode Helicopter, Winton not only mentions that his dad is divorced, but also the fact that his house does have a pool.
Fly over my dad's house! He has a pool!
something that this couple we see here is really looking for, and ultimately the main reason why they choose Winton's dad's place over the healers. And overall, I just thought it was a cool detail that they did actually reference, and one that was seemingly pretty minor in the original helicopter episode, but one that ultimately became super important for this story. I just thought that was really cool to point out. Which is such a nice detail because it really connects the special with all these things from previous episodes. And I don't think it's just smaller or background details either, because although it's not 100% confirmed, you could even argue that episodes like Tradies involve the house being spruced up to look better in listings, or Stickbird being about Bandit feeling worried or stressed about this new job or move, as something like this was probably planned for a while. And although of course Stickbird is intentionally left ambiguous, I do really like the idea of it connecting here, as it serves as a subtle, yet convincing display of him always being unsure of this big change, and having to learn to be hopeful and throw out his negative feelings. And speaking of throwing stuff out, in his last minute of the family prepared to leave, having said all their final goodbyes, had their final laughs, and shed their final tears with their neighbors, get the news that the house isn't being sold. And with this, he decides to take advantage of the moment, and realizing what he and his family truly want, decides to not move, tearing the listing sign out in glorious fashion. And as silly as it sounds, this is an incredibly powerful scene. Not only because we see the healers preparing to leave, and Bandit making the big change to not actually move, but it's done so beautifully. I was just expecting them to crack a few last jokes, have the characters talk about how much they'll miss each other, and with Bandit tearing out the sign, make some entertaining comment about it as they all have a laugh like usual, and roll credits. But of course, the episode goes one step further, or rather a few, with it pulling a classic but effective case of showing, not telling. Because rather than actually hearing the characters, we get a song that plays while we see everything happening, which, as weird as it sounds, really emphasizes the strong emotions of the situation way more than any dialogue I think ever could. As we just hear this strong but also sad soundtrack, coupled with the visuals such as an empty healer house, almost completely devoid of the colorful energy it once had. And it really shows that not only are the family going through a lot, but that it's the end of an era, as even with the house not being sold, this special does conclude a lot of arcs, both big and subtle, whether it be Rad and Frisky's surprise meet from season 2 turning into a marriage, Winton's dad finding love after he divorced, something that just began as a short passing line in season 2 and developed through numerous short cameos, Brandy finally having a baby after struggling with her ability to have one, as seen in season 3's onesies, and Bandit having his previous worries be settled once and for all. And of course, the episode not only marks an end to all these stories, but also pays tribute to plenty of others, whether it be the aforementioned dance mode party, with everyone even including Chattermax on the loose, or Easter eggs such as Greenie, the balloon from Mum's Skull briefly flying by. And overall, with all of this in mind, combined with the fact that this special features an incredible soundtrack and gorgeous visuals, even by the show's high standards, it all comes together to perfectly embody everything the show stands for, and the qualities audiences have come to love for over 5 years. And when the whole special ends and transforms from that beautiful evening view into the credits, and the theme begins to play, it still just gives me chills, even after watching it numerous times. It's so calming yet grand that it perfectly represents how, after everything the family has been through, they're finally at peace, and all's right with the world once again, as they get excited to return to a status quo, but one that is still changed, and setting up for brand new adventures for years to come. But yeah, in case I haven't made it clear enough, this special is nothing short of beautifully well done, and something that, as silly as it sounds, has affected me on a level I did not expect. Like, I literally had to take a day or two just to fully process it all, because it hit me in the feels that much. And even with all I've written down, I haven't even covered everything I wanted to discuss. Like how Pretzel was possibly revealed to have two mums, which could mark a first for the show's history, or how Bucky is, in my opinion, one of the most overhated characters in the show's history. But I'll talk about Brisbane's best real estate agent and professional art critic another day. However, to properly end this video off, I wanted to further discuss the theme, which is about change and how seemingly negative things can actually lead to good outcomes, because that really touched me personally, as experiencing unfortunate or crazy weird stuff only to somehow end up better than before is kinda the story of my life. Now, I won't bore you with the entire story, but in essence, by watching random videos online when I was probably way younger than I should have, I accidentally found out about YouTube poops, which led me to a lifelong obsession with absurd humor and memes, which is kinda what those videos are about. And years later, this interest eventually led me to YouTube poop compilations, one of which just so happened to be about this new show called Bluey, a show that, in my opinion, seemed like just another dumb, corporate kids show. But as I saw it, albeit edited in many crazy ways, I thought it was interesting, so I gave the source material a watch and became fascinated by it. Now, already running a YouTube channel by then, which I was inspired to create after my brother accidentally started one on his school account, I made the choice to focus my channel towards almost solely YouTube poops of Bluey, which were in retrospect, incredibly poorly made and cringeworthy. So much so that the BBC themselves would ultimately strike them down. And at the time, I was devastated, because that was essentially the one thing that made me popular and gave me any kind of recognition. I didn't really know what to do, but after some thinking, realizing that other Bluey content, as in reviews or analysis videos, were few and far between at the time, I got an idea. Rather than waiting for others to talk about the show, what if I became the change I wanted to see and just did that myself? And ultimately, with little else going for me at the time, that's exactly what I did, and still doing to this day, more than 3 years later. And normally, this is where the story would end, but unfortunately, I turned out to be quite the immature person as I got into the YouTube game. I constantly lashed out at people who disagreed with my incredibly amateur content, misused my popularity for things that really weren't a big deal, and showed some messed up content in my older videos, under the guise of creating surprising or edgy memes. And with this coming back into the spotlight at around early 2023, there were more than a few who were rightfully upset, and this, combined with my overall declining mental state, lack of personal connections or affection, and getting frequently harassed already, to the point of even having my personal info and address leaked online with threats, I let myself fall into complete mental ruin, losing it completely online in front of everyone, going on crazy rants, and finally announcing that, after everything I've been through and all the mistakes I made, that I was done living life. I couldn't stand what my life had become, so I felt that taking it would be the only way to stop my suffering, and according to myself, pay for what I did. But before that could happen, despite me making plans and knowing exactly what I was going to do, there were a set of texts that caught my attention. A message desperately begging me to reconsider, and that this person on the other end not just appreciated me, but needed me. It was none other than Ruli, a now former editor in the Bluey community. Now, at this point, we really didn't talk that much, and we kinda just did our own thing, but I always thought he was kind of a cool guy, and despite my huge regrets and disappointment with life, his plea did kind of affect me, and just enough to decide to live a little longer. And as it turned out, the results ended up being better than I could have ever expected. Later that year, we would actually meet in person, and further become good friends as we hit it off. And while I secretly had a crush on him, I obviously never told him this, as I assumed he would find it super weird, and plus he was already taken anyways. But as life would have it, not only did my horrible controversy and my mental breakdown somehow bring us together more than we could have ever imagined, with him helping me out, but I would find out in October that he had recently broken up, and that he had a crush on me since the beginning of the year. And since that very moment, on that very late October night after an editing call session, we've been dating ever since, and having moments I never thought I would ever experience. And just imagining that, if I did not endure any of these mistakes or bad events, whether it be giving up my channel after the takedowns, or deciding to end it all after my controversy, I would have never been able to enjoy the beautiful things in life I have now, and learn from the mistakes I've made in the past, so I can ultimately entertain and help others in the future. And because of that, and despite all of my ramblings and nonsensical complaints sometimes, is the reason I've learned to appreciate life more than ever before. And why the sign, Bluey's fantastic, wonderfully done, 28-minute special episode, serves as not only a perfect tribute to the show, but also may or may not have been the very first to leave my eyes a little wet after watching. My name's Hideaki, and until next time, I wish everyone a pleasant goodbye. Oh my goodness, I think this is actually making me a little emotional, I'm not even joking.